Hi, everyone. I'm Crystal Shackleford. I'm a postdoc at the University of Copenhagen. Today, I'll present work on frames of conflict that I began during my PhD at the New School. So religion and religious difference is often argued to motivate intergroup conflict. But in cross-cultural research, my collaborators and I challenge this popular argument, finding instead that religious belief can promote more positive intergroup perceptions and behaviors. As part of this research, I conducted my doctoral fieldwork in Palestine, and this revealed alternative narratives about the conflict that emphasize either religious or political cores. So for example, religious conflict is seen as identitarian with mutually negating claims, while a political narrative emphasizes rights and resources. A religious narrative is more likely to be seen as exclusivist and invoking kind of deep-rooted ancient primordial animus. And these suggest very different prospects for multicultural societies more broadly, such that religious narratives portend cultural clashes of civilizations, while political narratives suggest that multicultural societies are not doomed, but need equality to succeed. So I investigate these ideas in studies with Palestinians in the West Bank and Jewish and Palestinian citizens of Israel. Finding first that Palestinians in the West Bank believed the conflict was more political than religious, as do Palestinians in Israel, while Jewish Israelis believed it was roughly equally political and religious. And amongst Jewish and Palestinian Israelis, believing the conflict is religious in nature is linked with believing the conflict isn't malleable, that it's fixed and it can't be changed, and with viewing the situation itself as zero-sum. And malleability and zero-sum thinking are both psychological processes that have been shown to mediate how people involved in conflict reason about conflict and resolution. So the way that conflicts are viewed by outsiders may also be very consequential for how observers in the international community think about the conflict and the groups involved. To investigate this, I conducted a pilot study with a sample of Americans via Prolific, using a between subjects manipulation that highlighted either the religious or the political dimensions of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, finding that a religious framing seems to generate reduced malleability beliefs and greater zero-sum thinking on the part of observers, outsiders to conflict. And a religious frame may also lead to less optimism that the conflict can be resolved via diplomacy and negotiation. So some implications. So on the one hand, religious belief of people can be benign and even be seen as a positive force, depending on the context, where it can promote greater cooperation, be seen as a pathway to dialogue and commonality and so on. But if the conflict itself is religious-sized, if it is ascribed to have a religious nature, then these religious conflict representations may lead us to essentialize and reify conflicts for overall harmful effects. Another implication for future work, conflict framing itself can be a target for interventions, because often successful interventions avoid posing strong challenges to the in-group and instead target forces around or giving rise to conflict. So here, I think that conflict framing can be a promising target for cognitive interventions via these processes of zero-sum thinking and malleability beliefs, which downstream are already known to impact conflict transformation in other contexts in the Middle East and Latin America. Further, in intergroup context with power asymmetries, then I think these interventions must also consider the role of power. So think about malleability beliefs, for example. We know that these beliefs can be targeted to promote willingness to work for peace and other positive intergroup outcomes. But for dominant groups, sometimes non-malleability, fixedness, staticity, and zero-sum thinking can be protective, because for dominant groups, change can be seen as threatening. So overall, when it comes to these types of religious frames, the consequences depend on which people are the objects and the subjects of the religious framing. As conflict frames are belief systems and narratives with psychological antecedents and consequences, but they are also tools which serve a function. So we can zoom out and ask, what function are they serving? What types of thinking do they activate? What is being mobilized for what purpose and for whom? And thinking about how this fits into other work on religious nationalism and things like this, it seems to be the case that group membership, there may be an asymmetry here, such that group membership might impact the perspective gains and costs of religious frames and religious claims, such that dominant groups may be able to derive greater benefit from religious framing and religious claims, specifically by fusing religious claims with modern ideas of the nation, as we see in various manifestations of religious nationalism that are currently ascendant in Israel, in India, and the United States. So that's all. I'll close by thanking my research team, my collaborators in Palestine, my collaborators at the New School, and finally all of you for your attention. Thank you.